Yes.
Do you like overly long explanations of game mechanics and or wildly deranged speculative delusions? Well then, consider watching this video, clicking that like button, and subscribing as we start off with this overview of the new Final Fantasy XIV job, Viper. Can you tell I haven't slept in 3 days? So just straight off the cuff, a general overview of Viper is that it's a very fast-paced and honestly pretty exhilarating looking job that focuses mostly on its GCDs. These GCDs can be split into two categories, which for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to refer to as Twin Fang actions, denoting actions when the swords are separated, and Joint Fang actions, denoting when the swords are joined, obviously. I'll go into the specifics of what differences these two categories have a bit later, but for now, let's just go straight into Gauge explanation. So first off, let's just start with the Fang Gauge. The Fang Gauge essentially has two parts, but we're just going to focus on the blade for right now. What the blade shows you is kind of two things. It shows you what stage of your combo you're at and what combo you're currently locked into. So essentially what this means is when you're at the middle of your combo, the Fang Gauge, both blades will glow red. When you're at the end of your combo, both blades will glow blue. If there's no color, then you haven't even started a combo and you should probably press a GCD because that's how damage works. Now this only applies to Twin Fangs. It does not apply to Joint Fang at all, like nothing. Now additionally, what these blades also show you is which path you're on. Now, if the left side is highlighted, you're on essentially the damage buff pathway. If the right side is highlighted, you're on the haste buff pathway. When you first start a combo, like without having any sort of finisher or blue buff from a combo finisher on, you'll have both paths available. But after that, you'll be essentially locked into either the left or the right path. Essentially, if you see any of these icons up here, you're going to be locked into one of the paths associated with any of these finishers. So again, either haste or damage up. So like I said before, the Fang Gauge has essentially two parts. This is the second part where we have our ranged marker. These red diamonds at the bottom indicate if we have like a stack up to be used on a joined action that is a ranged attack. Keep saying it, but I'll go more in depth with this later, but the action this is used on is a joined action. So like the other joined actions, it's very strong if we look at the number on the video and compare it to like the twin actions, but it's also very slow. It has the same penalty, but essentially you'll be getting this every 40 seconds when you use the joined action that starts off your joined combo. So, you know, this one. And last we have the Awaken Gauge or the Venom Gauge. I think the Venom Gauge sounds pretty cool. You know, it's like you're doping yourself with poison or something like that. That makes you remember the traumatic history of your hunting ancestor. So the way the Reawaken Gauge is used is pretty simple. It's very straightforward. It's essentially how Enshroud works. You'll get 50 gauge, you use that 50 gauge to enter an enhanced state, and you'll get enhanced GCDs that have increased the attack speed by quite a lot. The GCD that you'll be using to enter this state is on the global cooldown. I just said it was a GCD. Why did I say GCD twice? Whatever. You'll use those about 6 times, and in between each of those you'll have a weave as well. Now we won't know exactly how good this state is, but it's safe to say this will probably be like your hardcore burst state, right? So, you know, again, pretty self-explanatory. You just use 50 gauge, go into it, you know, do your 6 combos and then do your weaves in between them. Also, we have another way of entering Reawaken, and it's this oGCD right here. This action essentially gives us a free usage of Reawaken. You just press it and you use it. But Belvedere, I hear you cry out like an old cobbler about to meet his end at the hand of his own beautifully crafted shoe. How does one gain Reawaken Gauge? Well, I'm about to show you. Yep. So before I give actual numbers, I want to be very clear that these numbers are from my own personal testing and are completely subject to change. Like, they could change once the media tour information comes out. They could change tomorrow. They're very subject to change. Also, I would like to be clear about my testing method. I recorded 60 FPS footage and plugged it into a site called somewest.com in order to frame count. I essentially use frame counting to try to get an exact number, as exact a number as possible from the start of the weapon skills animation to the very end, and then round it up to 2 decimal places where it was applicable. I began the count on the frame just before the button press and ended the count when the frame turned white, like so. So now we can finally talk about the differences between Twin Fang and Joint Fang. So essentially both Twin Fang and Joint Fang will give us gauge generation. For Twin Fang, any of these actions, any of these combo finishers will give you 10 gauge. For Joint Fang, any of these two actions will give you 5 gauge. So essentially you'll be getting 10 gauge in Joint Fang and 10 gauge in Twin Fang. Pretty simple, right? And now you might be thinking, well, we were talking about differences. What are the differences between these two? Well, this is the important part. Like I said before, Twin Fang and Joint Fang have drastically different GCDs for their actions, okay? To begin with, Joint Fang is locked behind a 40-second cooldown just to start its combo. But on top of that, it has a much higher GCD than a Twin Fang action. So because of that, you'll generate gauge a bit faster in Twin Fang than you will in Joint Fang, because you're literally locked behind 40 seconds to even enter your Joint Fang. Well, to enter your weapon skill Joint Fang. So as I said, the way these GCDs work, even though they're all on the same universal GCD, twin actions and joint actions have totally different GCDs, right? So for Twin Fang, your GCD without the haste buff will start at 2.42 seconds, right? With a haste buff, you'll have 2.08 seconds. Conversely, with Joint Fang, you'll have 2.92 seconds without a buff. With a buff, it'll be a more manageable 2.5 seconds. Now, this seems like a pretty bad trade-off at first. It's like, well, the joint actions are just slower, right? And you do generate more gauge when you're in your twin actions, just because they're faster. Like, you'll be getting gauge essentially like every 6 seconds, 6 or 7 seconds if you're playing completely perfectly. And the trade-off for this is going to be that, well, joined actions just do more damage. Like, the first joint action does about 87% more damage than the first twin action. But if this wasn't enough, the joint actions just give you all of your buffs in a much quicker manner. The joint actions give you both the red buff, the haste buff, and the damage up buff. Meanwhile, with the twin actions, you have to get those buffs by doing about 6 GCDs, give or take. And for join, you're just doing 3 basic GCDs. Now you might be saying, well, there's only 2 buffs, right? Isn't a third one a debuff? And that's true. But I pretty much use process of elimination, and I'm, concrete in saying that this is most likely a damage buff. Because when Yoshi P applies this debuff to the enemy and then separates here, we don't see any dot tick on it at all. We don't see a dot tick or anything. It could be the servers for testing are messed up, but I don't think that's true because the enemy was still taking damage. It could be a whole host of things, but I don't think it's a dot, and I don't think it's a damage down like, Amy implied. I think it's going to be a damage up when you apply it to the enemy sort of skill. It's also the same sort of debuff that we get from the secondary starter of your combo, which is the red drop down attack, which I also thought was a damage up, debuff on the enemy, or like a damage up buff for you. With the enemy takes more damage from you basically. So while Joint Fang will be slow, it's an incredibly powerful GCD because it allows you to get both your damage up, your haste, and your damage up from the debuff with just 3 GCDs. That's very strong. Joint Fang is very, 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 very strong. Like, if we basically wanted to compare this, Joint Fang is kind of like if Makio and Midare had a baby. It's kind of like that. It's really strong. So additionally, there's also another very good difference between these 2 categories of actions. When you do a finisher for your Twin Fang combo, you will gain or proc a continuation effect that will allow you to single weave an oGCD. Now this oGCD is essentially a Joint Fang oGCD, but it doesn't appear to do anything or give some sort of buff. It's just pure damage. Conversely, again, when you go into your Joint Fang and you do either the second or the third skill after your first Joint Fang, you'll get a double weave. That is a Twin Fang action. Now, which one starts off the Twin Fang double weave will change depending on which one you use. And again, these just seem to be oGCDs that do damage. I couldn't find anything in the video that implied anything else, that they just did damage. Maybe there's some sort of trait, hopium, but so far they're just damage. But a good rule of thumb is to essentially remember that when you're in Twin Fang, you're going to do 1 weave because your GCD is faster, right? When you're in Joined Fang, you're going to do 2 weaves because your GCD is much slower. And for our last difference, we can look at our ranged combo. The ranged combo has a lot of things that are pretty negative to it. It has a very slow GCD, like I said before. It's 3.45 seconds without any sort of haste buff, which is like 207 frames. And, you know, only 2.9 seconds when it has a haste buff. So it's significantly slower than your other combos. Like, again, even slower than your Joined Fang normal combos. But the real problem for this is that it doesn't generate any gauge at all. Now, the reason this is a problem is because we're just going to assume right now that your awakened state just does significantly more damage than the rest of your kit, right? We're just assuming that. So you want to be able to build gauge up as much as possible. So doing anything that kind of stalls you building gauge is going to probably be some form of potency loss. Even if this, again, does a lot of damage, it might not make up for that potency loss. We won't know until we actually see the potencies, but that's just the assumption I'm going on right now. And this might make the action seem pretty bad. Maybe I'm making it seem worse than it actually is, but it does have some benefits. Again, even though like I said, it might not be a potency gain, you know, compared to like losing 10 gauge off of doing your normal twin combo, it still does quite a lot of damage, and it has the same continuation swap combo that the other actions have. So it could just have a raw potency upgrade over your, you know, your normal twin if you're just missing like 10 potency. And it's a little niche to bring up, but you can use it in place of your normal combo if you're about to overcap your gauge. Even though the gauge is like 100, you'd have to mess up, I mean, a lot to need to be worried about overcapping that, but it is something that you can use it for as a tool. You know, you can just fire off 3 of these without worrying about, you know, oh no, I'm overcapping, but I can't go into my awakened phase. Oh no!
Okay.
And there's one more final usage that I wanted to discuss, but it won't really make sense if I talk about it right now. So I think it'll be better if I just bring it up in the next section. But for now, that ends our discussion on joined and twin fang actions and the differences between them. Okay, so that was enough about the GCDs. Let's talk about the oGCDs. And they're all pretty sparse. They're all pretty sparse. Haha. There are 3 oGCDs that we see in the trailer, but there's only really 2 that we'll use. The one I'm leaving out is the dash, which is, it's a dash. It's fun. It doesn't do any damage, which is great because, you know, I personally do not like damage on dashes because then it incentivizes us to not use them as dashes, but that's a rant for another time. Now, the first GCD is pretty much the one I've been referencing this entire time. It's the GCD that the animation swaps you from whichever, you know, fang you're in. If you're in joined, you'll go to twin. If you're in twin, you'll go to join for that animation. It doesn't seem to have an effect, like I said before. It just does damage. Again, as a rule of thumb, like I said before, when you're in your twin finisher, you'll be doing a single weave. When you're in your joined finishers, I guess I should say, you'll be in a double weave afterwards. So just remember that, you know, joined, double weave, twin, single weave. So our next oGCD happens to be our only buff as well. This will probably be the GCD that I'm going to be focusing most of my theory crafting and speculation around because it's 120 seconds and it allows us to instantly go into our awaken phase. Obviously, this is incredibly powerful because, our awaken phase is essentially our burst. We don't have the official potency, but it seems pretty likely that it will be stronger than both our twin actions and our joined actions. So obviously it's very important that this lines up with not only our own personal buffs, but also buffs on our team. The 2-minute meta is permanent. So that's why when we're talking about alignment, I really do think that the first join action is going to be its most important partner in our toolkit to align with this specific ability, simply because it's 120 seconds. And this is good because it means that we can line up our join action, our first join action, with this ability because it's 40 seconds. And, you know, 120 is divisible by 40. So this means that if we use our join 1 on cooldown, which we should be doing, our 4th join 1 will come up at around the same time as our Reawaken steroid buff, allowing it and our awakening burst to essentially fall in line with whatever 2-minute buffs we might have on our team at the time. Okay, now that we got all that down, let's start talking about possible rotations and openers to kind of end things off with, okay? Rotation speculation is pretty tentative because, lol, no potencies. But I still want to dip my toes into it a little bit. Focusing more on tips and timings for our GCDs, you know, is kind of the aim of this section. I discussed it slightly earlier anyway, so I'll summarize here and go into timings for each GCD slot, where applicable. So, Twin Fang actions have a GCD of around 2.42 seconds when unhasted, and 2.08 seconds when hasted. Joined Fangs have a GCD of 2.9 seconds when unhasted, and 2.5 seconds when hasted. Our Awaken GCD has a slightly slower starting GCD. This burst animation thing right here, sitting at like 2.15 seconds unhasted, and 1.8 seconds while hasted. Our second, third, fourth, and fifth GCDs have a timing of 1.93 seconds unhasted, and 1.65 seconds while hasted. Our final GCD has a timing of 2.93 seconds unhasted, and 2.47 seconds while hasted. I did observe some form of errors like a 0.5 or 0.10 difference between GCDs, so keep that in mind, but I decided not to factor that in all that well, you know, when thinking about rotations. I'm going under the assumption after the first Awakened GCD, all other GCDs will be normal when you're in the Awakened state. And I'm talking about it again because I am a salesman and I will sell this action like it is the greatest sale that you have ever heard of in your entire life. The range join combo is around 3.45 seconds unhasted and 2.9 seconds while hasted. So again, very slow. Aha. Okay, so that was just the parameters, you know, of the GCDs themselves. Now that we have those timings down, let's get to some hardcore speculating. It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get crazy. It's gonna get unconfirmed. Ignoring those pesky potencies that we don't know, I'm pretty sure Twin Fangs are just gonna be filler when our joined one is not up. Because of this, we mostly want to keep in mind how many of these Twin Fang actions, or just actions in general, we'll be doing until our joined starter is off of cooldown. Essentially, something like a 40-second loopable rotation is what I'm focusing on and, you know, thought of and constructed. The Join 1 combo gives us immediate access to all of our buffs, like all of them. So it'll probably be the de facto priority to start a rotation with. The quickness of buff application is what sways it for the opener, even ignoring potential potencies of the finisher combos for Twin Fangs. He's just that good. These are the two possible openers plus the rotations until the second join comes off cooldown that I looked into. One is for a slightly delayed single twin action opener, and the second is for an immediate double joined opener. Both I'm theory crafting with the assumption of a mug window. Like, you know, this mug, the vulnerability up window. Let's start with the first opener. So why am I including this twin action? That's because the second starter, this button, applies the red buff, debuff, the thing on the enemy, which I strongly assume is a job specific res down, and I'm calling it res down. I'm just calling these res downs now, man. I'm sick of saying damage up debuff. What the fuck? Our second and third join will be inside the mug window and allow us to get our buffs up for our awaken instantly. We'll only get one fully buffed join 1 at the end of this rotation, so keep that in mind. Now, this has a trade-off because you'll pretty much lose all of your second join combo in this opener for the sake of buffing your first join. So it might not be that good, but you know, I think it's good because I added it in here, which is what our second opener would address. Our second opener starts right off with our join, as well as a double weave of our Reawaken steroid. We'll be using one charge before we go into Reawaken, and one after we leave Reawaken. Now this is a slightly messier 40 seconds because it's not exactly 40 seconds, but it has the benefit of getting one fully buffed join 1 in and being usable immediately, so you know, Bob's your uncle, as fair as fair. It should in theory front load a lot of your damage, you know, you shouldn't have to worry too much about, you know, well, I'm using something that doesn't do damage, so it'll suck. And speaking of using something that doesn't do damage, I'm really unwell, and towards the end there, you could see I snuck in my little hallucinations of what I want the ranged action to be, which is something usable outside of range, by substituting one of the twin actions with a usage of our range resource, because I really want to use the range in the rotation. Regardless, both openers should be usable. I slightly prefer the, you know, the Twin Fang first opener, because I really believe that getting a buff joined will be a lot stronger. Getting 2 buff joined actions will be better than getting like 1 buff joined action in the window. So, and it really doesn't delay you by that much. And if the ninja is already setting up mug, or if, you know, you're already setting up, you know, scholars, what's that critical thing called? Oh God, I'm blinking. Oh God, I'm recording and I'm blinking. I'm recording my blank. Change stratagem. That, yeah. If they use that, yeah, you know, if they use that, they delay that. It's good for delays. But yeah, this will all probably change once the media tour comes out, and I'll probably cry my eyes out because it's all tentative and anything. But for right now, it's done. Everything I've researched, all my conclusions and all my reasonings have been laid bare within this video. I am just done. I'm 100% done. That should be everything. Everything, folks. We can go home. We're free now. Besides one more thing. Which is that, yeah, a 40-second rotation might not even be the best rotation to be looking at. You could probably break it down to like 20-second or like 12 seconds or something else, but I'm pretty stupid, and also I've been working on this all week, so, you know, I'm only human. I mean, I mostly wanted to discuss this theory to get like a general idea of how at least the timings of the GCDs would look in a potential 40-second rotation with the info we have. This kind of like lay a groundwork, so, you know, if the stuff comes out, anybody has a base where they can like look at timings from this video, if they watch this video, you know. I think what we'll really need answered, like with the primary question for me that we really need answered, is like if our awakening windows are just going to be a much higher priority than our Fang 1 like being used on cooldown. I'm really hyped for the media tour info and also dreading it. But yeah, I'm pretty much done. I'm gonna go pass out. But if you found this really complicated or hard to follow as a general guide, I really do apologize. I tried to condense it as much as possible and like summarize my thoughts while keeping the information clear. But I do encourage you to go look at other guides and, you know, do not let me be your ceiling for knowledge. Always adapt, always grow, okay? Because you gotta be your best you, the only you that you can be. And, you know, that takes a lot of resources, so expand your horizons and stuff. Well, hype for Viper is still high. Love for Viper is still high. Desire to forfeit all possessions of Viper is still high. I really want as many people to like, you know, as possible to like give Viper a try. I think it's cool. I think it looks cool. I'm glad that we finally have like a dual blade scouting job. Like I said before, I really enjoy it. And I really wanted to provide as much information as possible, you know, as I personally can, just to help out as many people as I can. Or just, like I said, give a base that people can build off of if they ever decide to try their own theory crafting. So if you have any questions, please ask in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to answer them. Probably not right away because I'm gonna sleep for like, I don't know, like 3 days after this, probably 3 or 5 days. Just a good old nappy. But for now, I say goodbye to you. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell, I implore you. And thank you for all the support, as always, all the time. Appreciate all the comments I read. I always try to go back and look at them and like and, you know, add the favorites and stuff. So, now that it's done, I say to you goodbye. Bye-bye and keep it velvy. Belvy. Keep it belvy. Is that a good catchphrase? Keep it belvy? I don't know. Maybe I'll do it. Keep it belvy? Yeah, keep it belvy. Keep it belvy, baby. Bye-bye.